Welcome to the Mindset Game podcast. I am so excited to have a very special guest with us today, Joe Galvin. Joe is the Chief Research Officer for Vistage Worldwide. And for those of you that are not yet familiar with Vistage, Vistage is the world's largest executive coaching and peer advisory organization in the world. It is bringing together leaders to learn and to grow and to expand. And it's really a community of over 23,000 CEOs, business owners, and presidents that get to interact with their peers. So these are people that have similar issues, similar challenges, but in dissimilar industries. And they get to work together with their Vistage Group chair to make even better decisions that not only benefit their companies, their communities, and of course, their families. And Joe is responsible for providing Vistage members with the most current, compelling, and actionable thought leadership on strategic issues that most small or medium-sized businesses have. And on a personal note, I got to hear Joe, read multiple articles by him, but most recently to hear Joe at an event that Vistage held for speakers. And I was just so fascinated. And I said, I got to have this guy on this show. So welcome, Joe. So grateful and excited to have you here.
Well, thank you, Vera. I've been looking forward to this all weekend and excited to just share some of the things that we learn on a daily basis from this amazing community of CEOs, both here in the United States and around the world. It truly is an amazing community of high integrity leaders who are really looking to grow their businesses in ways that are positive for themselves, their families, their communities, as you mentioned. So it's a it's a great privilege to have this role. Getting all choked up talking to you.
I'll grab a sip as well while we're at it. So, Joe, would you be willing to share with us how you even got into this cool role that you're in?
Sure, yeah, I'm the Chief Research Officer. That's CRO. That stands for Career Really Over. But I've got the privilege of leading Vistage Research, and our mission is to become the most trusted resource for the issues, topics, and decisions of business optimization and leadership enhancement for the small and mid-sized business CEO. This is not, if you had asked me when I graduated from college in 1980, if I would end up here, I never could have guessed that I would have been on this path. Long story short, following a brief and largely unspectacular career in playing basketball in Europe, I joined Xerox in 1984 in a sales role in what I call the end of analog selling. Because 1984 is pre-technology. So you would go into a building, you'd knock on the doors. I had a New York City territory. I had 4 city blocks, 40th to 44th between 5th and Madison. And I knocked on every door every month. And spent 5 years at Xerox. And it was at Xerox that I began to see the advent of technology. I was fortunate enough through some friends to get connected with Gartner. In those days, it was Gartner Group. Today, Gartner is a over $4.5 billion research and advisory firm. I was the 22nd North American salesperson. In 1989, was a $40 million company. Rode the sales organization as we blew it up from 40 million to 1.2 billion. And along the way, got involved in global operations where I did a variety of technology projects. And that led to a transition. And I don't know if I went to the dark side or came from the dark side, depending on your point of view, to become a Gartner analyst in the CRM and Salesforce automation space, which I did for 5 years. Took a brief stint back on the sales side and then left to join a company founded by a couple of friends of mine called Serious Decisions, which took the Gartner model of research, analysis, and insight and pointed it to sales and marketing leaders. And I led the sales service there and left there after 5 years and joined Sam Reese, who's CEO at Vistage. He was CEO then at Miller Heiman, which was the world's largest sales consultancy and sales training firm. Strategic selling, conceptual selling, literally hundreds of thousands of salespeople have been through that. And I created Miller Heiman Research, which was again focused on what are the key issues sales leaders are taking on. Sam left and I hung out for a little while, and then Sam came to Vistage and invited me to bring that same approach, the Gartner-esque approach to issues, topics, and decisions, but now focus it on that small and mid-sized business CEO. He gave me a blank whiteboard and a brand new box of dry erase markers and said, go figure it out. And now 5 years later, we share our content through the research that we do, the interactions like this. We presented all of our Vistage Executive Summits, and it's always focused on what our members tell us is most important to them. And we're working on some stuff right now. I'll share a little bit of it later about We asked, what is the most significant leadership issue you're faced with today? And we had 1,500 CEOs respond to that. So we get great data from an amazing community, and I have the great fun of figuring out what that is and then sharing it with folks, because we focus on our community, of course, but we want all small and mid-sized business CEOs and businesses to grow and prosper. The small, mid-sized business, that is the growth engine of our economy. The big companies, Amazons, the Microsofts, the IBMs, they get all the attention, right? But the reality is it's the small and mid-sized businesses that employ 70% of the Americans in our country that work. So it's just, again, it's an amazing community. And again, I'm not sure if I had actually decided to get here, I could have gotten here. But I tell you what, I just can't believe my good fortune. And when I said career really over, I mean it, because this is the last job I'll have, at least as long as Sam will have me.
Well, thank you for sharing, that kind of winding road, if you will, with us, because so many of the people listening are either at a place where they're looking back at their own life and saying, wow, how did I get here? Right? It certainly wasn't a clear direction or a straight road, should I say. And then some people are in a place where maybe they're feeling a little unsettled. Maybe they're curious to know what's next. And they're kind of just following the breadcrumbs and maybe utilizing those connections like you with Sam, right? So every relationship we make along the way, we never know where that's going to lead when it's genuine and when it's, really founded in love and care. It really is for life. And so
I learned early on that there's only two things that I can control: my attitude and my effort. And I know if my attitude isn't right, I can't bring the effort. Maybe that's my basketball background, my athletic background. But I know if my attitude's right, I can. And then you got to bring it every day. As an athlete, I learned you're only as good as you are today. Doesn't matter what you did yesterday, and tomorrow doesn't count. You're only as good as you are today. So you got to bring it every day. And if you do that, good things will happen. Can't tell you which direction. I don't know how you'll end up where you'll end up. But I also think that all of us are going through a personal recalibration of our priorities and our purpose. We'll touch on this, but this COVID experience, I've had so many conversations with so many people in different roles in different places, that has changed us, has forced us through how we hunkered down and how we protected and got into our bubbles, to really do some hard rethinking. And I think it's fundamental to some of the things I want to share about the importance of mindset, especially in the CEOs, because if you fail to recognize that fundamental recalibration of everyone, I think it's going to expose you to some unfortunate business consequences.
Well, thank you for bringing that up, because, this is a bigger conversation today, in the sense that we're not going to zoom in on a specific decision or trend or anything like that. This is a conversation about change and about that recalibration that happens essentially anytime there's a change in our world, in our community, in our family, or in our business. And so let's dive right in. What are you noticing around that recalibration, if you will?
Well, it's about mindset, and mindset's always been important, right? No matter what the times were. But now mindset is even more important. And it's not just, I want to make sure I got this right. It's not just that you have the right mindset, but that you're conscious of your subconscious. And I say that because we're living in this period of accelerated disruption. If you go back over time, except for the immediacy of wars, the Industrial Revolution took 70 or 80 years to play out, right? Massive disruption. You think about technology. Well, that kind of started in the 80s, so call it 40 some odd years, but really the internet has been about 15 or 18 years of massive disruption, right? Changed everything. Now you look at COVID. It's been 16 months since we locked down. Accelerated disruption. And what it has done is it's created an environment that none of us have ever lived in before. If you look at the pre-29 up to 12/31/2019, we were on a 10-year slow, steady growth trajectory. And you could just about predict it was going to be 1% to 2% GDP growth. Everything was nice and stable. I mean, there were some bumps along the way, but following the bookend of the 08 financial crisis, we had this long, steady growth. And then, pow, COVID happened. And we immediately dropped. And almost immediately we came back. So we're now in the States more so than the rest of the world. But we saw this accelerated disruption. And what that's created is compressed decision making. By that, I mean, when we talk about decision making, there's a lot of beautiful academic models about how decisions are made. But we have a model we call optimized decision making that says decision making is always a function of your instincts, which is how you feel about a decision, your judgment, which is how you think about it, and then the perspectives you incorporate from people and resources you trust and respect. Well, no one has ever been down this path before. There's no books, there's no data, there's no established best practices. No one's ever had to deal with this rapid deceleration and now this massive growth that's occurring. Consequently, there's no perspectives you can draw in because no one's been through this before. Because of the time frame, the amount of time you have to think about the decision and the amount of input you can bring to that, that's just not there. I really think about the mega shifts, right? The mega shifts. So what happens is we rely more and more on our instincts, which is how we feel about a decision. And how we feel about a decision is driven by the biases that we all carry, right? It's our bias for the status quo. A lot of people want to go back to what was. Whoa, that's really dangerous environment because that world doesn't exist anymore. People talk about the new normal or the next normal. There's nothing normal about this. We're in a completely new reality. We saw 15 years of behavior change in 30 days. Think about that. 15 years of behavior change from mid-March to mid-April. If we had said to our Vistage speakers, hey, Meredith, we want you from now on to do all your presentations in this little 16 by 9 box. Or if we said to all our chairs, hey, all 700 chairs, we want you to do all your group meetings virtually. Nobody would have done it. But boom, we all had to adapt. 15 years of behavior change. So things like work from home. Whoa, that genie's out of the bottle. I've worked from home for the last 10 or 12 years. It was my secret little perk, right? That genie's out of the bottle right now. And then it's not going back in. You're going to have to make decisions on that really quick, right? Everything, right? Not just Zoom communications, telemedicine, this, that, right? Our touchless experience, right? I went to New York City for the first time since this happened. You don't have to touch anything. You just Apple Pay. I've had Apple Pay on my watch for years. I've never used it. Now I use it all the time. So we've had all this seismic change, both in our personal lives and our professional careers, and we've got no basis to make decisions on this. So for CEOs facing decisions they've never faced before, right? It's important to be conscious of your subconscious. How your anchoring bias, that you want to be connected, you want to stay connected to that initial decision. Confirmation bias, right? We all know that one. I'm looking for things to support what I say. Or false consensus, meaning, I want people to go along with what I think. What it means, and again, I'm sorry for rambling, but I warned you about this.
This is
right?
awesome.
But what it means is that CEOs have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because walking around the office, patting people on the head, hanging out at the water cooler, all those really good things that great CEOs do to connect to people, that doesn't work anymore. You're going to have to make some really big decisions based on your instincts because you haven't had enough time or enough information, enough perspectives into your judgment. You're going to be making decisions from here. And if you make decisions based on how you want to feel, it's going to create issues. Now, I don't know what the right answers are, but I know that every wrong answer will be punished. We're on the verge of a worker revolt and migration. And what's driving that is the work from home phenomenon. CEOs are facing three big decisions right now. One is how big to bet, right? The economy is surging, right? GDP is off the charts. I could go on and on. Our confidence index that we do on a quarterly basis of CEOs is at its 9th all-time highest, right? Ahead of only, there were seven quarters after the internet bubble in 03 to 05, and then a very sharp spike after the tax legislation of 2017. And it's only going to go up. 71% are adding headcount. 72% expect increased revenues in the year ahead. We're on this surge. So how big to bet? We do a lot of work with ITR economics, and it was Dr. Brian Bolio who said, if you can sleep at night, you simply have not taken on enough debt, right? Interest rates are historically low. Markets are exploding, right? So that's a big decision. But the decision no one's ever had to make before, how do I bring people back to the office? It's not back to work, because the knowledge workers proved they could work remotely. And we learned how to manage that, right? But again, those industrial era management practices of, oh, I see Vertage at her desk, she must be working hard. That's been replaced by what does she get done, right? Now, the millennials and the Zs were pushing for this, but now we saw it and we all experienced it just like that. So bringing people back to work, but then the big question is how to hybrid. What's your hybrid solution going to be? Because you as a CEO might be comfortable having everybody come back in so you can look over the kingdom and say, oh, everything's good. But workers may not want to do that. And you know what? Because 72% are increasing headcount, workers have options. And this goes all the way through the food chain. Your hourly workers, your skilled employees, and your professional staff. Your hourly workers, we hear a lot about we can't find hourly workers. Well, that's at the bottom of the hourly scale. High quality hourly workers, those that show up on time, those that work hard, can pass a drug test, they're getting higher paying hourly jobs. You know that Amazon hired 350,000 workers between July and October alone last year? There was a big story about how they're going to run through the whole population because their turnover. So hourly employees are moving up. The higher quality hourly employees are going into apprentice programs. There was a story of a guy who was a bouncer and he had another hourly job. He had applied to IBM and got rejected in 2018. They called him back. They taught him the skills he needed to be a computer technician. Now he's a computer technician because they said, you know what? This is the right kind of person, right kind of human. We can teach them what they need to know. We see 19% of our organizations involved in some type of internship or apprenticeship program, taking high quality hourly workers and turning them into skilled workers. And those skilled workers, especially in manufacturing, right, where it's so hard to get people, not just to, it's not just your basic, manufacturing. This is complex stuff. And then your knowledge workers, they're free to roam. You're free to move about the country. And whether they want full-time or hybrid, I would advise a younger person, you want to be in a physical situation because you want to build those human connections. But my point here is that there is this workers' revolt and migration. And CEOs are going to decide what their hybrid plan is going to be. And then employees are going to decide if they want to work there or not because they have options, because everybody's hiring. And, where in 2019, the big differentiators were, what's your, apart from salary and job trajectory and company, the traditional benefits, the traditional stuff, employee development. What are you investing in improving me as a worker, as a professional, as a human, right? Culture was super big last year before COVID, right? Because culture is the only thing that you can uniquely differentiate, right? I can copy your product. I can steal your customers. I can take your employees. I cannot replicate your culture because that's uniquely yours. So culture, and again, the generational shift was people wanted to be part of something, right? I want to have more than just a job job, right? Culture. Now it's flexibility. Flexibility is the new black. And again, workers have options, and you'll see turnover and you'll see transition. And when we ask this question, what's the most significant leadership challenge you're facing? 2-to-1 was hiring. Why? Because human capital is the fossil fuel of growth. You need people to grow. But now people are shifting and people are moving. Retention is more important than your hiring strategy, right? So anyway, a long way to get to the point about mindset. And that CEOs, well, all of us, we have to accept the fact that we are in a new reality. It's not the next normal. It's not a normal. It is a completely new reality. So much has changed, and we've all gone. I firmly believe we've all gone through some personal recalibration of our priorities and purpose. And I think when you are conscious of your subconscious, and you open yourself up to not just what you're comfortable with, but what will ultimately determine the fate and fortune of your business, it's a heavy load. I mean, CEOs are working without a net on this one because, as I said, I don't know what the right answer is, but every wrong answer is going to get punished severely in this market, especially when there's so much growth out there. Okay, was that enough?
It's just so cool to hear you articulate what's actually happening right now in the world and some of the really tough decisions that need to be made in such short periods of time and how much risk to take on and all that kind of stuff, that these leaders are not as prepared as they could or ideally would want to be to make these big decisions. And so how does one trust the subconscious, right? Their intuitive guidance, if you will, whatever we want to call that, when there just isn't enough evidence, there isn't enough time, they haven't had enough time to think about it and processes and get all the advisors and all the evidence that they need to make that decision with certainty. How do you do that?
Well, it's interesting. One of the phenomena we saw through this, once the initial wave went through, is, the value of being part of Vistage is you get to sit down and work with 14 or 15 other CEOs and have these amazing thought leaders like you come in and talk about your areas of professional expertise. And so you get these perspectives from people, like you said, that are in, similar challenges, similar issues, dissimilar industries, trying to sort this out. And we had a very good year, as a lot of CEOs who thought they could figure it out on their own came into to learn from others. And if you're not a lifelong learner, you're not going to live for long. But again, in this environment, because there is no expertise, there is no data, there is no best practices. And again, if you go back to pre-COVID, well, we had this 10-year run of goodness, right? And all those principles that we learned apply. Yeah, the internet, specifically the internet, disrupted so many businesses, but we had adapted to that. We were in a good space. And then boom, COVID happened. I remember I was in Buffalo on March 3rd. And this is just when you're starting to hear rumblings, right? This is March 3rd, 2020. And we were at one of our executive summits and we had a morning session and COVID was starting to appear in the headlines. And so we did a session and we said, what would you do if your revenues went down by 25% overnight? And then they were, oh, that's not going to happen. And then guess what? It did happen. It's that type of shock and awe that this brought to business plans. Every strategic plan, every financial plan, tear it up, throw it away. Because by the end of March, it was a completely different world. And that's where, again, come back to mindset is so important, because we all have still unaddressed PTSD issues from this at a business level, at a personal level. It's going to come out sideways for some of us. Others are better at dealing with it than others. It's caused real trauma in so many lives. And I'm fortunate because COVID didn't touch the health of anyone that is immediately close to me. But I know it did for a lot of other people, and I know of people. But there's a lot to process. And when you compound that with this fundamental change in priorities and purpose in our workforce, and then you look ahead and you see nothing but revenues and profits growing ahead of you, and you see financial institutions saying, here's money to invest in your business, go and grow. It creates this real paradigm. It's a real mixed bag of thoughts, which again comes back to why, my theme here is CEOs need to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because what your instincts and your biases will tell you will make you feel good. And we're all looking to feel good, right? May not be the best thing for your business. It may not be the best thing for your employees. And you sit here on this precipice of growth. And again, I don't know what the answers are, except that you need to be open, and you need to be flexible, and you need to be conscious of your subconscious.
And I'm so grateful that you are sharing this, because whether the listeners are CEOs or somebody listening might be a stay-at-home parent, or might be somebody who's a student just starting their career, wherever they are along their path, there is a gift and a wisdom in being comfortable in the uncomfortable, because any change presupposes discomfort and uncertainty and some fear or doubt or something. It's the human experience. And when it is an accelerated disruption, like what we've experienced, that requires compressed decision making, we just don't have the time, the capacity to do all the research and gather all the evidence that we may want to make a logical decision. And so, people may not feel comfortable to move forward. They may feel stuck. They may feel paralyzed. And in those moments, what we need to remember, as you're sharing with all of us today, is to go inward, to become conscious of the unconscious, which more often than not is how am I feeling right now? What's happening in my body? What are the emotions? To really be with the fear or the discomfort, the uncertainty, to see it for what it is, be with the truth of what is, and create a situation in our life, as Vistage offers with these peer advisory groups, for connection, for sharing, for conversation, because there's something very magical that happens. And I've had the opportunity to to speak, as you shared, with Vistage over the past few years, and to do some of the corporate training. And I've gotten to understand the psychology of the chairs and often of the members, because I speak about mindset and resilience. And over this past year, when I've asked members, how are you feeling right now? That's how I start every conversation, by the way. The 50 or more that I've done this past year over COVID, I always start with, what emotion are you feeling right now? And it's always this blend. What I heard was anxiety is number one, top the charts. And then there's always something that goes with it. I'm anxious and I'm grateful. Yeah, I'm grateful I get to be with my family some more. I'm grateful for my team. I'm anxious, but I'm proud of the opportunities. I'm anxious, but right, there's this kind of blending of energy. And just being with that is very powerful. And I know in the book Think and Grow Rich, and we've had much research about the power of peer advisory groups in terms of tangible results. But we know far back, before we could even measure that this joint intention with vulnerability and with heart, with a deep caring for one another, does have an effect on our ability to have clarity around our decision making. So for those people listening, whether they join a group like Vistage, or anything else, or create their own mastermind group in their life, but a place to really share in not a competitive, but rather just a heart-based, curious place. There's something very powerful that happens in those scenarios. So would you be willing to share a little bit more now, Joe, with us about change? I know I got to see one of your videos that are available on YouTube around kind of Corona and the change, and kind of this change curve that we go through as we experience any disruption in our life, whether work or otherwise. What do people experience typically? What can we expect in any disruption?
Well, I think that the concept of change, and much of the work that you have done, was all done in a pre-COVID world, where the example of real exaggerated change is what we saw with the internet, and how the internet went from, hey, I can buy a book online, to now, Bezos makes more money in 1 minute than 50% of the workers make in a month, right? We saw that degree of change, but this is accelerated change. I think the concepts of how we react to change are not dissimilar to how we reacted as children, as little children, right? We look for immediate gratification. We want to do what makes us feel good. And I'm blessed. I've got 3 little grandbabies, and I had little Ruth, who's 18 months, on my lap just this morning. And she says, I know, yank it. And she starts kicking and she jumps off my lap. Well, she's seeking that immediate gratification to go and find whatever's going to satisfy her little 18-month-old needs at that given moment. When we're under extreme stress and pressure, like we feel, both personally and professionally, all driven by this crazy COVID thing, we tended to revert to what we are comfortable with and what makes us feel good, especially when there's not. It's one thing to say, I've got option A, B, and C, and they're pretty straight and narrow, and I got data and experts to support each one. This is a blank canvas. There's no net on this one. So the temptation is to address change by either stagnating and saying, well, if I don't move, at least I can't get worse, or I'm just going to close my eyes and run down this direction, not knowing if it's right or wrong. Somewhere in between is this measured response of not making a decision and sticking to it necessarily, but situationally adapting on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. I mean, if your strategic plan is anything beyond September right now, you've got a high probability it's not going to make it, because as we get further down the vaccine path, as children return to schools and schools reopen, as hopefully the child care industry rebuilds itself, that completely collapsed. And now the 2 million women that are on the sidelines can come back into the workforce in some number. We'll see another wave of change. We created this concept you mentioned called the Corona curve, which is really just a way I came up with it last April to try to make sense of this. It's just an inverted bell curve. that says we started over here and everything was fine. And then we heard about this thing called COVID, and then the market crashed, and then we went down to the bottom. And we had no idea how low it would go. And then we got down there and we entered what I called the pause, which was that period of 3, 6, whatever months. And then we started to climb out of it. And we went through this reboot, which is kind of, hit the restart button, rebuild, not repair, because repair puts it back into a prior state, but to rebuild towards this new state, into recovery to get to this new reality. And when you embrace the fact that what you're entering is a new reality, it's kind of like when Dorothy stepped out of the farmhouse and all of a sudden everything's in color, right? The principles of gravity and some of the main physics concepts were the same, but beyond that, everything else was different. We're in this new reality, and consequently, everything that you knew or thought you knew may or may not apply in this new reality. So again, having we were talking on our executive call today about this, some of the things that carried us through: flexibility and agility, individually, organizationally, mentally, emotionally. We're entering this new reality that is unlike any reality any human has ever entered before. The accelerated disruption of the last 16, 17, 18 months, whatever it is, that period of time, is now rendering us into this brave new world. It's a world where workers have options and flexibility. It's a world where there's this pent-up demand. There's this world of this consumer who's been dying to spend money in places. It's this world of income inequity. But we're starting to see everything you learned, everything you need to know about what's going on, you learned in Econ 101. When supply is high and demand is low, prices do this. When demand is high and prices are low, prices do that. Guess what's happening? Demand is high, supply is low, and prices go up. We saw lumber go 400%. And then the factories turned on, they upped capacity, inventories goes, and now we're seeing it coming back. We've got a major supply chain problem. Why? Because of the port outside of Los Angeles. At one point, there were 30 container ships filled with thousands of these containers. They couldn't offload because of COVID restricted the longshoremen. And oh, by the way, there weren't enough truck drivers to transport it. Now in May, there was an outbreak in one of the major shipping hubs in China. You know where you're going to feel that? Come Christmas, because by the time this stuff comes through. So this whole new reality driven by supply and demand is going to change so much, is changing so much. And if you try to apply the principles, rules, and laws of the pre-COVID world, chances are you're going to feel some pain. Now, having said that, my crystal ball is no clearer than anyone else's. And no one can predict when or how or if things are going to change, which is why it's important to have a long-term vision, but you have to be very in tune to the people that work for you, because retention of your existing employees is the single most critical success factor going forward. If you are losing people, and there will be some attrition, there will be some collateral damage. If you are losing people, it will take longer, cost more to get new people in to replace them. And then you have to do the knowledge transfer. And this is especially true in small and mid-sized business, right? A big company loses somebody, boom, the next person up, right? Smaller businesses, so much of that knowledge is institutional knowledge. So I think as you talk about this, and we try to, I know I kind of rambled off on this topic, but when you think about how to make these decisions in this disruptive era, it's as much about making decisions that have open-ended alternatives and options, and continually adjusting and adapting and being highly tuned to the situational dynamics of your business. And one thing we didn't talk about is customers, right? How do you connect to the connected customer? Customers have now changed. They become more independent. They become more autonomous because they haven't had salespeople knocking on their doors, coming in and sitting down, buying them coffee, taking them out to lunch. They've had to learn how to function more autonomously. So how do you adapt to this more highly connected customer who wouldn't return your call a year ago, and now they want to buy everything you can provide them, but you can't get your supply chain to fill it in? So there's all these dynamics going on, which again, it creates this new reality, which causes a lot of anxiety. And there will be some good decisions and bad decisions. And I think part of this flexibility is giving yourself the flexibility to know that I may have gone down the wrong path, but I'm not going to go down it because I went down it. I'm going to stop, either come back or I'm going to jump over, because things are changing. It's a very fluid environment. And the good news is that this is all happening in a surging economy. Unlike 2008, 2009, right, when we came out of that, there were no jobs for people, right? Everybody laid off because we had this self-created financial crisis. This was an act of God. This was a storm that hit the entire planet at once. And we'll learn through this. I mean, I can't wait for 5 or 10 years when the really smart people look back and tell us what actually happened. In the meantime, those of us that are in the game, we got to play the game that we have in front of us today. And we have to go out and bring it today to try to win today so we can play again tomorrow and the next day and the next week and the next month.
And it's just beautiful the way that you've kind of put that with a nice bow for us, because it really is a game, right? We set intentions, we have vision, we have big long-term plans. And at the same time, moment by moment, we've got to be flexible and just be conscious of what is happening around us and what is happening inside of us in terms of how we feel about that, and just and follow that, and just be willing to adapt in the moment, even when there is something that we fear, because fear is a part of that growth and learning and recalibration, because it's new. So that willingness to step into the unknown, as you said, in a very mindful way, by doing what we can to look at the research, right? For example, what you provide Vistage members and the research that's out there, and at the same time being willing to take those steps, to not stay stuck where we are, to take some risks, mindful risks, and at the same time to be resilient, to build our own resilience, because we need that. If we internally collapse into the pressure, then we're not going to be able to have that ability to make those decisions and stick with those decisions in the face of doubt or uncertainty. So it's flexibility, it's resilience, and it's that mindset, believing that it will all work out in the end.
You need to surrender to the new reality of the world that we're in. And that reality is going this way. If you're looking right or left or behind, you'll get left behind. And I think that creates great opportunity, a lot of challenges, and I think a lot of fun if you approach it the right way. I try to have fun at least.
Well, I think that's just beautiful, because we do get to have some fun. And as you said, there are many blessings in all the pain and the suffering and the growth. There are many, many hidden blessings. And I think that's what I've heard all along, from those, individuals who were hit the hardest sometimes. I heard just that light, still inside of hope or curiosity. And I think that's what it's about, to be able to notice that and build on that and trust that.
I've heard so many people comment that they have gotten so much closer with their families, the people that were within their pod, because we were all faced this great fear. I mean, we didn't know if this was going to be that end of world movie that we've all seen, right? Where we didn't know that. And I've heard so many people talk to me, and I know I felt it, that you got closer to the people that you're close with. There were predictions of this mass wave of divorces. That didn't happen. Hasn't happened yet, at least. But again, we'll see. Time will tell. It's just every day's a new opportunity to be great. And you just got to step forward.
Joe, I'm so deeply grateful for your wisdom today. I mean, yes, you've shared with us a lot of insights and research-based things and trends and what's happening. And I think most of all, it's your intuitive wisdom, because I think that what you've shared can be applied to anyone, anywhere, anytime, because we all go through change. We all need to remember to trust ourselves and to be flexible and adaptable and flow through life. And thank you for your time. I know you're a very busy man. And how can people learn more about you, about Vistage, and just a wonderful world of opportunities that Vistage opens up for these leaders?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for the opportunity and for the kind words. I thrive on sharing what I learn, and at Vistage, we are open to helping everyone in ways that they want to help. Easy answer, go to vistage.com. We talk about our sole purpose is to help high integrity leaders make great decisions that benefit their business, their families, and their communities. We talk about the life of climb that every CEO is on. Everyone's got their own mountain to climb, and many people have been up that path before. And it's the power of being able to engage and connect with like-minded individuals, lifelong learners, people that are willing to share, give more than they get, and to form into groups and to power through this, because again, no one has the answers. And I think at Vistage, what we do is we provide an opportunity to learn from others experiencing similar to, I mean, I couldn't imagine being a CEO trying to sort this out on my own. I just couldn't imagine doing it. And that's what we provide. And 63-year-old company, just an amazing community of humans. And again, if people are interested, just go to vistage.com. Very great, excellent website. Take you through, go to Research and Insights. You'll find all the stuff that we do. We share it with everyone. And again, thank you very much for the opportunity. We're very grateful for you and folks like you that come in and spend 2 and 3 hours with our group, sharing your expertise, providing that perspective, so CEOs can focus on growing their business and helping their people. And that's all we care about. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Joe. All the best to you and your family.
Thank you very much. You as well.